All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a discussion of Titus Groan, the first part of the Gormenghast. Is it a trilogy? I don't know. Sometimes it's spoken of as one. Mervyn Peake had at least another book in mind as well. But what we have completed anyway. I know there's also there's a short story or something of that nature as well that's set in this world. But we're gonna cover the three books, the three completed novels that you could call, if you want, the Gormenghast trilogy. And today we are discussing Titus Groan, and by we I mean myself and my distinguished guest Jay from A Contemplative Reader. Hello, Jay. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing fine. I'm really looking forward to this conversation, as I think that this book offers lots of fodder for the two of us to go over, both in this book and in the books to come.
I agree. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I had been told about this for a very long time that many people regard Mervyn Peake as being one of the preeminent examples of great prose when it comes to fantasy and just literature in general. And I have to concur with that assessment. I really enjoyed basking in the prose here, and my overall, my real quick review, my one sentence review is that it's Charles Dickens meets Studio Ghibli. Was my my kind of like what when I was wrestling with what is this? In the beginning, it's so eccentric, it's so quirky, and it's so atmospheric. And that was my immediate impression from this. And I loved being steeped in that. And I will say the plot was very, plodding, very slow, but that I think it wasn't really the point. More, it was about the experience of being steeped in this and enjoying the prose. So I had a great time with that. And I do feel that there are some big themes that we're going to talk about in a moment. We're going to stick to non-spoiler assessment here for a few minutes, and then we'll give everybody a warning, a wave when we start delving into the spoilers. But Jay, what are your overall impressions of Titus Groan?
This book is an instance, I think, where I would describe the main character as Castle Gormenghast, based
Mm,
upon what you're talking about with the atmosphere being taking on such a primary role in the description of Mervyn Peake and the prose that he uses, often for pages, to just describe the various nooks and crannies of this ancient crumbling castle with all sorts of different areas around it. The I ended up reading from the older mass market paperback version because I had purchased the same thing that you, the same
yeah, yeah.
omnibus edition that you had there, but I found this is kind of bulky. So when I saw this in a when I saw this in a used bookstore for $3, I bought it, and it's got Mervyn Peake was an illustrator, and I believe this is one of his
Yeah.
illustrations on top.
Well, this has a bunch of his illustrations too, which
Okay,
I
wonderful,
really enjoyed. That's
wonderful.
And in fact, that's a common observation is that this feels like something written by an artist in
Right.
some ways. It's very imagistic, very just that's a big part of the atmospheric nature of this is that this was in words a representation of his vision, you could say, as an artist. Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, he paints pictures that I'm somewhat of a visual reader. I try and create movies in my head to think of what's being depicted on the page. Oh, there you go, right there.
Yeah. That's
Exact. Oh, lovely.
Deer Pike, I believe. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So, yeah, it's a book that's filled with. You can really immerse yourself in it. In fact, just to go on that phrase, I did an immersive reading of this book. I listened to Simon Vance's audiobook narration while I was reading it. And that was, to me, it was very helpful
Okay.
with the different character voices. And the humor really came out
Yes.
through that narration. But just kind of go back to my initial thoughts on it. again, the name of the book is Titus Groan, but Titus really is kind of deep in the background. He's an infant.
Right.
He's this,
Can't do a whole lot yet. Yeah.
right. He's the long-awaited heir to the Groan, male heir to the Groan family.
Yeah.
Again, he's got an older sister, Fuchsia, that's 15, I think, teenager. Um, so there's been this wait and wait and wait for this. I believe it's the 77th. I think he is the Earl of Groan in waiting. And so the narrative, as I thought was interesting, it revolves around his birth and various rituals that kind of frame the narrative of the story. But Titus himself, of course, is not he's the star of the show for them.
Mm.
But in terms of a reading experience, he's an infant, so there's no dialogue from him, for example, other than the occasional wailing for when something is going on. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Brilliant.
that's so we have with the castle as the as what I would call the primary character, if you want to call it that. Um, then we experience all of the eccentric personalities that go along with that, and you alluded to that from the Groan family itself, the lords of the castle, the various servants, and then the bright carvers, the dwellers of the mud dwellings outside of the castle.
Yeah.
And that's definitely. I don't want to jump the gun and go into themes, but I don't want to forget that. For example, it's definitely the class system
Yeah,
that
but let's
exists.
go ahead. We can dive into that. You're absolutely right. The class division as calcified by tradition. You alluded a moment ago to how steeped in ritual the Gormenghast is. And it seems to me that if there is a predominant theme here, it is probably the extent to which tradition blindly adhered to can isolate, can calcify the people, and you have this upper class that is completely irrelevant. That it seems like they're just lost in these daily rituals, which also can be comforting, in a way that there's a degree to which tradition as comfort is a positive thing, but when you get so steep in that it isolates you and that it prevents you from changing and progressing and evolving, there's this stagnation and this alienation that results that's really unhealthy. And so I felt like, and also the effect on the working class people, the bright carvers, the people in the mud dwellers. There's this huge disconnect here. They have brutal, short lives. They age very quickly, and there's a kind of a. It's not even there's. You could call it neglect, but it seems like the people of the castle, the aristocrats, are just completely unaware of the lives outside because they're so immersed in their arcane, irrelevant rituals as if they're the most important thing in the whole world.
Right, right, right. This isn't a spoiler because I think it's in the very first chapter or two of the book. I think it describes that the only time they even interact is on one
On
couple of
occasion,
days,
a
maybe
year.
in
Yeah.
June. Yeah, one day in June or a couple of days in June, where
Yeah.
the mud dwellers, the dwellers outside of the castle, are these gifted artists of bright carvings, and they bring them in for display to the Lord Groan, and Lord Groan decides the top three, and they get displayed then in a part of the castle where nobody ever
No one
visits.
never goes.
This poor rot cod, the
Yeah.
cleaner of the bright carvings, gets a visitor, once every few years, it
Which
seems
seems to
like.
suit him fine.
Yeah, Mervyn Peake, again, an example of is just his sly sense of humor, describes Rod Cod's existence as a perfect existence.
Yeah.
He's a hermit by himself for the
I
vast
mean, a
majority.
lot of us introverts could probably almost appreciate that.
Right,
Yeah.
right, absolutely, absolutely.
But no, it's a very gothic, dismal portrayal in some ways, but with that humor that definitely makes it all just it adds a quirkiness to it. But it is it. I have to wonder too, because I did read a little bit about Mervyn Peake, being curious about what kind of person could produce this eccentric story. He had a pretty tragic life. He had a lot of thwarted aspirations as an artist, as a creative person, and tragically died fairly young of some form or other of Parkinson's, most likely, which robbed him of his creativity, his ability to draw, to write. And he never did. He did serve in World War I and had a nervous breakdown as a result of that. And he just never really got that success in his lifetime, which I think certainly has to have affected his outlook in some ways. But
Right. Right. So I didn't do a lot of reading about his background, but I picked up. I can just envision his life in that first half of the 20th century being such a cataclysmic time for the entirety of the world, but particularly Europe. Um, and although he was born, as I understand it, as the son of missionaries in
in
China.
China, yeah, which
Mhm.
has some influence on the book, I think.
The rituals, I think,
Yeah,
some of that shows up in that, absolutely.
yeah,
But what I could envision him, again, going back to the themes of the book, and the so many times it's described as the ironclad rule of tradition and ritual.
right.
Um, I'm envisioning him again. I'm projecting here probably, but I see that time in Europe as being, there's still being royalty there, but the influence of royalty is declining. So there's
Mm,
all of this ritual still going on, but what does it really mean at this point?
right.
In the aftermath of two world wars, you've got again, as a pastor in a traditional branch of Christianity, I particularly was thinking about how he might have been influenced by. He was seeing these rituals in these established state churches of Europe,
Sure.
and how all of these things were being done. But in the end, was it really leading to love of neighbor and good works and those kinds of things? Uh,
Or any
it
kind
didn't
of
stop.
transformation. Yeah.
Right. Instead, the two of the worst wars that humanity's ever seen arose out of that. So I envision him writing about these rituals. I saw it described in an article as a book about ritual and religion without any sense of God or transcendence to it. I mean,
Yeah.
there's various rituals there that have Christian language grafted onto it. There's zero connection to anything that I would call traditional spirituality in that. So I thought that was again very interesting. I could see. I was just wondering if this was his critique of what slavish adherence to ritual and tradition, but doesn't lead to any kind of interior. And you alluded to that interior
Yeah.
transformation.
And a
Uh,
stifling of creativity as well under such
right.
conditions, which he, as an artist, as a creative person, suffered from. And I have to think there's some of him in the Bright Carvers, these people who were actually creating something wonderful and pouring their life essence into the pursuit of this art. And they have their own form of dysfunction in that community as well, which we can talk about.
Right.
But the
Right.
fact that so much was poured into these creations, which were then just either destroyed or just locked away in a room that no one ever sees. And you have to think, oh man, that's a Kafkaesque exploration of the plight of the artist, of the creative person, isn't it? It does remind me of Kafka's A Hunger Artist, for example. As
Mhm.
and some people do compare the two actually, which I think I can see Kafka and Peake. That is, there are some similarities for sure.
Right. Right. Yeah, his art, as I understand it too, he was commissioned during World War II to do paintings of scenes of war, and he actually ended up in Bergen-Belsen
Yeah,
and toured that concentration camp. And
Yeah.
I think I have to imagine all of that was influenced him, and how art can arise out of the most ghastly of circumstances,
Right.
uh,
Right.
in the depths of humanity, and that can be caused by that. Obviously, there's nothing in this book that's remotely as horrible as as Holocaust or World War II, but I
Right.
have to think that that influences mindset to some extent as he was writing this book at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that. So yeah, any other spoiler-free elements that we can discuss before we dive into the actual events of the book and the characters and all of that?
I don't. Yeah, one more comment I will make, just for purpose of anybody who's considering reading this book, without going into spoilers, is that although it is marketed oftentimes as fantasy, I believe somewhere I've seen. I know you see that online sometimes, and I think perhaps on some of the marketing of the books himself. Don't expect really uh, what you might. Again, you being the more
Yeah.
of the expert in fantasy and what is fantasy and what is not than I am. The traditional elements of fantasy don't seem to be there. I think
Yeah.
it's about a castle with a bunch of eccentric characters and some weird events that go on, but
Right.
there's none of the other traditional elements of fantasy that I found. So I think that was more of a general marketing strategy than a real authentic description. But I'd be curious to hear what you think on that.
Sure, yeah. I do want to correct myself. I think I said World War One earlier, and it's actually World War Two, of course, because he was
Mm-hmm.
born in 1911. So that would have
Right,
been quite something to have a 5-year-old in World War One. Uh,
right, right,
so-
right,
but anyway, is it fantasy or not? I think that I tend to take a broad view of what could be fantasy. And to me, yes, it's fine to call this fantasy. It leans toward the gothic in some ways. The fact is, I think if you're a reader who loves something like Susanna Clarke's Piranesi, or if you're a fan of some of Neil Gaiman's work, like The Ocean at the End of the Lane, or something like that, or you like the quirky, the eccentric, you appreciate something that is just wildly different in some ways, this could be a good series for you to jump into. Also, if you just appreciate fantastic prose. I will say that it's not a page turner. It is not something that you would want to pick up if you're in the mood for a quick read, something light, or like a popcorn read or anything like that. No, it is the other end of the spectrum from that. It is when you steep yourself in, you allow yourself to just feel deeply, and it's one that sticks with you, I would say, as
right.
well. But is it fantasy or not? Why not? Yeah, let's go with it. I like to take a generous view of what qualifies as fantasy. So
Very
I'm
good.
fine with it being called fantasy. Yeah.
Very good. Just to go back to your comment about the reading experience of this book, what I learned about myself as a reader of
Mm.
this book was that my reading pace, um, I need to work on how my reading pace can match the pace of the book. And what I mean by that is when I first picked it up, when we were messaging each other about when we were going to read it and when we were going to have this conversation, I was reading just a couple of chapters a day, again, through the immersive reading, and really just like I was drinking a fine wine, sipping it slowly and just
Sure.
ingesting it and immersing myself in that world. But then as we got to, a week or 10 days ago, uh, and I was looking at the number of pages I had left before our conversation this morning, I'm like, I got to speed this up. And so I increased the speed of the audiobook and my page turning. And I enjoyed it less,
Uh-huh. Hmm.
because it was like I was speed reading it, and it wasn't as enjoyable
Yeah,
experience. So
it's
I
not
would
a
just
speed
recommend,
reader thing. Yeah.
yeah, I would highly recommend to anybody reading it that you just take your time with it,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah,
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 allow yourself to be steeped in it, would be my recommendation. And again, if you're wanting something that shouts at you and moves along, then no, this is not what you want to pick up right now. But
Not your book. There are some exciting moments in it,
yeah,
but
there is a fight scene, which
there
is
is, and I want to talk about that in the spoiler section because it's one
yeah,
of the. I think it's some. There's are different fight scenes, but one of the ones I'm thinking of was
yeah.
actually kind of humorous.
I mean, it's hilarious in a very macabre kind of way, you know.
Right, right. Good way to put it. Good way to put it.
Yeah, I mean that kind of summarizes Gormenghast in a way, I think. But
Hilarious and macabre. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. Well, I think that that'll probably be sufficient for the non-spoiler. Hopefully, we've convinced those of you who are in the mood for this kind of thing. I loved this. I just loved it, and I also love a fast-paced read sometimes. But this was just hit me right time, right whatever it was. But I enjoyed this experience a lot, and just being steeped in it, and a huge respect for Mervyn Peake as an artist, as a master of prose. Just I could read some of those sentences 5 times and be like, oh yeah, like you said,
Right.
like just sipping a fine wine and or in my case really it would be a really good scotch, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, but let's do it. So I'm gonna let you talk about any character or moment or whatever you want. This is spoiler time, people, so I'm waving my arms to warn you. We are going to talk spoilers now, so if you have not read Titus Groan, this is your time uh, to take off, I guess. But thank you so much for stopping by, and for anyone else, here we go. So, Jay, what spoilery moment uh, are you most eager to discuss?
So just to go back to what I was just alluding to with you about the humor in these macabre scenes and these fight scenes, and um, one of them, there's two of them that kind of stick out in my mind initially, and there's more I'm sure we can talk about. But one is again, the steer pike ends up being this kind of really manipulative character,
Yeah.
extremely manipulative character, and uh,
One viewer compared him to Iago in Othello, you know.
good comparison, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so he ends up in, as the story progresses, ends up in conflict then with other characters because of that, and he ends up in a fight with, I believe it was Flay, kind of the right this the main servant of Lord and Lady Groan, and Flay. Lady Groan has all these cats, these white cats that swarm around the castle, and Flay picks up. So during this fight, Flay picks up the cat and throws it at his face, takes a big chunk out of his cheek. It
Yeah.
just the way he describes it, I think, is just hilarious. And of course, Lady Groan sees this, and she's quite upset. And my notes of this book, as I was kind of describing each chapter, a little bit of a summary of it. And I would say, this person said this person said this, and then mayhem ensues. That seemed to happen quite a bit throughout this story. But the other really, the really, I think the
Yeah.
funniest one for me in a macabre way is when I think I can name, if we're in spoilers, I can name the
Oh yeah.
character. Sour Dust, who's the lead, um, kind of the master of ceremonies, the priest, if you want to call it that, again in a non-religious sense of the rituals of the
Yes.
castle,
Yeah.
dies in this fire that Steerpike is manipulated to kind of gain more influence within the castle. And so Steerpike steals his. So he ends up just as Sour Dust ends up as a charred body, and Steerpike steals his head,
Yeah.
and that leads to two funny things in the book. Number one is when it comes time to bury Sour Dust, they have to bury a complete body. So they find a cow head and they graft it onto his body to bury it. And then later on, Spearpike uses it. He uses the actual skull of Sour Dust to create this 9-foot apparition to scare. Again, he's enlisted
Twins, Cora and
the twins,
yeah.
Cora and Clarice, who are the sisters of Lord Groan, in his schemes, and he's trying to manipulate them into silence. So he creates this this ghost apparition with
Yeah.
the Sour Dust skull on it. So that's just an example of again, the hilarious and the macabre all at once in this story. I mean, it literally laugh out loud moments in really ghastly circumstances.
My candidate for this would be the great duel between Flay and Swelter,
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
is it's a long time coming, and you have Swelter doing his sort of terror campaign, leaving little little cupcakes or whatever on the stairs to say I'm watching you, I'm
Right,
stalking you. And
right.
then Flay, taking his own measures, and then you have this crazy duel where Swelter has his cleaver and Flay has a sword, and there's a spider that gets on
Oh,
the
that's right.
moment that Swelter is about to get Flay. There's a spider on his eye, and there's just insanity, absolute insanity, and it ends up being a pretty gruesome thing, really, with Swelter's demise. But Flay gets a lot of those action scenes in here, doesn't he? And the
Yes.
amusing thing is you have this relatively old guy with these cracking knees, who's wrapped his knees, by the way, in all of this. There's an illustration in here with these giant like protuberances on his knees
Oh,
because he's
yes.
trying not to let his cracking, he's trying to be stealthy, so he's got he's got silencers on his knees essentially. And the whole thing is just so crazy and wacky, but gruesome at the same time. And you have these two who are, at odds with these two servants of Gormenghast who are very much at odds with each other over that.
Right. And I never really quite figured out, other than that they're just two men jockeying for position within the castle, what exactly was going on. Did they hate each other to the point that they wanted to kill each other? I
I
don't.
think part of it is they're both in their own ways. We talked about the sort of the calcification of a person's psyche under these conditions, and this is a place where anyone would go insane. If I lived in Gormenghast, I would go crazy. And all these servants of the household. Flay, of course, takes great pride in his position as head servant, but Swelter also has he's the head chef, and they're both servants of high stature. And as such, they are peering across at each other and as rivals, more or less, right? As they're not groans, they're not of the blood, so to speak,
Right, right.
but they play important roles here. I would
They're the
argue.
next. Sorry,
Go ahead.
the next status, I think, below the royal family, if you want to call it that. I think in terms of their class system,
Yeah,
you got the Groans at the top, and then I think Flay, Swelter, Sourdust.
Sourdust especially, because if
Yeah.
anyone really controls the daily life of this castle, it's Sourdust, and eventually his insane, even more insane son.
Barkentine. Yeah.
Barkentine. I mean, who comes up with these insane? These are uh, that's why I said Studio Ghibli, because the only other thing I've ever seen with characters this eccentric and just stuck in their ruts is probably from the Studio Ghibli films. But yeah.
Right. Right. Oh, yeah. The names are
Oh,
all
they're hilarious. They're Dickensian. The names are
right.
very Dickensian. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. Right.
Yeah.
So, um, just kind of thinking back to again, we talked about the class system,
Yeah.
and another thing that I learned about myself as a reader in this book is that I've always been a theme person. I look for the religious elements and the spiritual and the philosophical,
Yeah.
which is why I like Gene Wolfe so much, for example, because he provides all of that, as well as Tolkien and all the other classics. Um, but what I found in reading this book, and I certainly found themes and symbolism and wonderful prose, as we've talked about, but I did miss identifying with a character that I could really root for. Uh,
Uh-huh. True. Yeah.
the only character I end up, what a tragic character was, if I'm pronouncing it right, Kada.
Yes, I completely
Really,
agree. Yeah.
yeah, really was rooting for her to, of course, just Kada being the mud dweller,
Yeah.
who ends up being the wet nurse for Titus because the Titus's mother wants nothing to do with him for the first several months of his life, so they have to find a wet nurse to feed him.
Years even, really.
Yeah, years. Yeah. So, and there was another interesting example of this class system is Nanny Slag, who is also a very hilarious character.
Yeah.
Well, um, goes out to the mud dwellings to find this wet nurse, and there's all this ritual described just for even them to have contact with each other.
Yeah.
Things had to be said and done. And so she finds Kata, the wet nurse, brings her in for a period of time, and then Kata goes on, and kind of this tragic lovers quarrel and all these things that go
Yeah.
along with that. She ends up pregnant again after having lost an earlier child.
Right.
And I really, at the end of the story, and I'm hoping in the next books she takes a larger role in it. I don't know that though. And
Well, I'm
then
not sure if she's even alive at this point. I mean, there was I felt that there was a moment when Flay witnessed her suicide.
right, but then
And
in the Erling, I interpreted that a paragraph as that being her. So I had the exact
so
same thing. I didn't know if she's alive or not.
I thought for a moment that was her as well, holding her child, but it could be another mud dweller woman simply taking
Oh,
care of the
okay.
baby. Um,
Oh,
that's eventually what I decided, but I could be wrong. I will admit readily that it could have been Kata.
well, I in my notes I certainly wrote that Kata was deceased at that point.
Right.
So it wasn't until that later paragraph I thought, oh wait, did I misinterpret that?
Yeah. Yeah.
There aren't too many moments in this book. Peake does do a pretty good job. If you're kind of wondering, well, what happened there? He'll explain it and he'll lead you on. At least he did for me anyway. So I never was second guessing what happened too much until then was the main
That
one.
moment, and also I would say the other somewhat ambiguous thing, although I'm pretty sure I know what happened, is the fate of Lord Groan, who and
Oh,
who drags the carcass, the corpse, if you will, of Swelter along with him into the what's the tower, the one that's all creepy and full of owls, or
yeah, I can't remember the name of the tower. Yeah,
something like Flint or something. But
yeah, Tower of Flint or something
Tower of
like that.
Flint, is it? Yeah. Okay.
Something like that.
Something like
Right.
that. Anyway, that place is very ominous, and there's like spirits in there or something that it would seem devour Lord Groan. He doesn't come back, so I'm assuming he's done.
There was a reference again, not recalling the exact language, but there was a reference to him wanting to be again in his after this fire on the library, which causes him to go into this descent into madness.
Right.
He envisions himself as an owl. And I think
Yeah.
somewhere he makes a comment about reincarnation or something like that. So
Yeah.
what I interpreted as that event was is he intentionally sacrificed himself to the owls to be eaten by them. So
Yeah.
he would become one with the owls.
Yeah. I that's kind of where I thought too. But
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, the tragedy there is, of course, and of course, we're book lovers, so we felt that deeply was the destruction of the library by
Oh, yeah.
the. I was prepared to be a little understanding towards Steerpike until then, but then it was like, ooh, my goodness, because he is mistreated. He's treated terribly by Swelter. He's treated, no worries.
I'll just
All right, we're back. That was actually Lord Groan calling Jay to to, uh, to tell him he's not coming back, and he was
he's
just
gonna haunt me.
he was hooting at you. Of course, you know a guy named Sepulcrave, which seems to be a combination of sepulcher and grave. You
Right.
got to think that that guy's not going to survive the book, right?
His mortality is imminent.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Right.
But
Right.
I felt for him because he was what the only thing that gave his life meaning in this incredibly bleak place, this vast, endless castle, which we could talk about more, even actually the endlessness of it, the symbolism of the castle. But the only thing that gave him happiness was his books, and that was his retreat, that was his escape, which was probably not a healthy escape because he was disengaged from his family, from his children. He is a sad figure, really, isn't he?
Right. Right. Yeah. I think the whole family is tragic, and whether it's a result of just these ossified traditions that they're expected to live up to,
Right.
or what is going on there. But yeah, Lord Groan had no. It was a loveless marriage, number
Yep.
one, to the Countess Gertrude
Yep.
Groan, and Fuchsia, the teenage daughter, is kind of left off to her own devices
I
and
feel
her own
terrible for
doing.
her, neglected
Right,
tremendously. Yeah.
right, and kind of has this weird relationship with Nanny Slag. That's
Right.
it's Slag is just so neurotic that you don't know where is she really being a good caregiver to Fuchsia or not? I
And
don't
the
know.
pet names they have for each other are abusive sometimes.
Right, right. Right, right, right. Yeah, there's just more examples of the little snippets of humor that you got from
Yeah.
Peake in this book. But right, so you've got this family that's such a this extremely dysfunctional family, and
Yeah.
you've got Titus being born into that. But of course, it's a very different family now with the death of Lord Groan.
Right.
Um, and so, I'm looking forward to seeing how he is raised from this point
Yeah.
on.
And if he
People,
somehow can transcend this passivity of because that's Lord Groan was passive, absolutely just pathetic in some ways. And I imagine he also was like, so it's easy for me to feel bad for Fuchsia because I'm witnessing her neglect. And Titus, the same thing. Like you said, Gertrude, the lady grown, just simply says, "Yeah, I'll see him in 5 years." I'm not interested in the meantime. And there's not an ounce of affection in that woman, except for unless you're a cat or a bird.
right, right, right.
So
Yeah, yeah. They tolerate a lot of things, but
yeah.
throwing a cat as a weapon was not one of them
Oh, you
for
crossed the line there, Flay. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So you're exactly right. But I think you alluded to the going back to the castle itself being
Yes. Yeah. As this almost infinite space, you
it's
know.
infinite space, and at the very end of the book, there's a one sentence allusion to its sentience. Now, I don't think that the castle itself, it's not like the building in The Shining by Stephen King, for example, which is actually, alive in some sense. But I think there's the building itself with all of its areas, from the roof where the poet dwells and it, chants his poetry to nobody except for
Yeah.
when Stuart Pike comes along because he's climbed up to the roof. Um, to obviously the overlooking the mountain and the lake and the mud dwellings, and then all the attic that Fuchsia goes into. All of that it's really a composite of again, Peake is, I think, using this as a description of just this group of people buried under
Mm.
centuries of tradition. I mean, I think 70s, again, if my number is right, if he's the 77th Earl of Groan, that means that this family has been centuries at this. And they look back, if you recall, again, the recovering lawyer in me was interested in when Lord Groan died, and Barkentine, the new uh, master of the order
Ceremony.
of the house,
Yeah.
went all the way back to the 10th Earl of Groan to find a precedent that well, the 10th Earl of Groan was missing for 9 days, so that means if Lord Groan is missing for 9 days, then we can install uh, Titus as the new Earl on the ninth day of Earl of Groan's missing.
Yeah.
Um, but what I did write down a couple sentences that I think are so beautiful and so haunting at the same time that I think gives us uh, a taste of the language he uses here, as well as the castle itself. He
Yeah.
describes autumn returned to Gormenghast like a dark spirit re-entering its stronghold. Its breath could be felt in forgotten corridors. Gormenghast had itself become autumn.
Yeah.
What a beautiful image that is, and it's so descriptive of what it must have felt like to inhabit that place and its dank corridors and weird characters and owls and cats and all the other things inhabiting this place. So that's just one example of how I think Peake really immerses you in the story. I was aided, like I said, by the audiobook, but I think without the audiobook, you could absolutely immerse yourself in the world without it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Brilliantly said. And within this incredible atmosphere, you have, as you said, and I agree, there was no character I ever felt like, oh, I can get behind this character. Because Titus is a wee little, lad who there's an indication that he is going to break tradition because he throws part of the ritual into the water at the when he's supposed to be becoming the 77th Earl of Groan. He rebels is that foretelling something? I don't know, but it's certainly seen as something significant, I think. So
right,
perhaps he'll have a brighter future. Although, frankly, I feel like this we shouldn't expect too much light here. I feel like this is going to be fairly heavy in its what happens to the characters. Like I maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's going to go somewhere different. But I feel like these characters are stuck in their ruts. What is Titus? How is he going to get out of this? I don't know. How is he going to be different?
right. Yeah, I think going back to your comment about Steerpike, and I had the same attitude toward him too for the first, few chapters that you're
Yeah,
introduced to him,
yeah,
is that he kind of this roguish young man, 17 years old, who's maybe going to be this person who leads this movement to eliminate this kind of ridiculous class system and all of the traditions and all of that.
right.
But he goes off on this manipulative path, which again, I'm not going to call Steerpike an allegory for any particular political leader of Europe at that time, but I have to again wonder if he had in the back of his mind what he was seeing in Europe with the manipulation of political leaders who promise this and promise that and end up using their power for evil.
People who
Uh,
take advantage of other people's anger, like he is manipulating the twins and their thwarted ambition the whole time,
right,
and
right,
using that, stoking it and using them as pawns, essentially, cat's paws in the process of climbing as high as he can go.
right,
And he does some pretty horrible things. He is responsible for the death of Sourdust. That's horrible. And at the same time, what is he destroying? He's. It's hard to. I don't like him in the least, but at the same time, do I feel like it's a great tragedy if he stirs up Gormenghast? I don't know. I mean, they need a little stirring up, don't they?
to to borrow a phrase from um, scripture about that sometimes evil, um, good can come out of evil.
Yeah,
What you intended for evil can be used ultimately for good.
yeah.
And I'm hoping Titus then, maybe with Steerpike kind of having cleared the way in a horrible way to get rid of some of these traditions, that Titus then uh, does as you indicated, being that character, that personality that leads Gormenghast beyond their current existence. Another you alluded to the uh, incident at the end of the book during the Erling ceremony, where he throws things in the lake. But also there's during the christening, which really wasn't a christening because there was no religious element to it, but they still called it that. He tears the book, and
Yes.
Peake describes that as being a blasphemy of the book of ritual. Uh, and elsewhere in the book, it describe. I wrote this down somewhere. That the chief. Let me make sure I get the quote right. The suggestion of change is the most unforgivable of all heresies. that's in there too. So
Yeah.
you will, hopefully we can root for Titus to be the
Well, if
one
there's
for.
one apt symbol for the tradition that has everyone in its iron grip in the story, it's that book, right? And the fact that he would tear a page is
Right,
probably indicative of something, but it's Steerpike who understands that this is where the power really is in this place. And that's where he's gunning for. He's become the assistant to
yep,
Barkentine by the end of
right,
this. Because he is clever and he understands this is where the real power is in Gormenghast, is in controlling the tradition, controlling the ritual. That's the role he's after, right?
right, right, right. Yeah, that was very interesting at the end in how you can see Barkentine. He by himself is in his 70s.
Yeah.
He had been waiting for 60 years, I think it said, to
In
become.
this room in in the deepest levels of the castle that no one else can even fit into, just sort of decaying there, waiting for it to replace his father. No wonder he's a little bitter, I guess, right?
Right, right.
I mean,
Yeah,
hardly anyone remembered he was there, even, right?
right. Yeah, he's one of those. Yeah, I mean, just one of those residents of the kitchen who ended up kind of weaseling his way into higher and higher. It was kind of fascinating to see how that
Yeah,
progressed over the course of the story.
yeah,
Um, yeah. So again, it really sets up. Again, Titus is only what, 2 or 3 by the end of this story.
right.
Steerpike, of course, being 17, 18 by now, um, will you wonder if it's setting up a rivalry between the two going
That's how I
forward.
feel. Yeah. The other
Mhm.
character I hope for, but I don't have a lot of hope because of the nature of this story, is Fuchsia. I feel that there's a genuine human being in there. Like she does act out and says some horrible things here and there, but essentially you can see that there's a person still there. Like she's still young enough to not be entirely lost to this tradition, and that she has her own mind as well, and she tries to escape. She has initially her room, which Steerpike invades, and then she goes out into the forest, and she has this romantic streak in her. There's a desire in her to escape this. You feel it, and she even
Right,
expresses it that she wants to get away from it all somehow, and yet she feels trapped. So I hope for her. I'm not again terribly optimistic given the tone of this so far, but I hope for Fuchsia that somehow she'll be able to transcend this or escape it. But yeah, I mean she's got nowhere to turn. It's kind of sad, except for Prune Squaller, which we haven't talked about yet. We haven't talked about the
right,
good Doctor Prune Squaller, who initially I didn't trust him very much, but turns out to be, I think, a pretty decent chap, for the most part. I mean, he tries to be helpful, and he's a bit goofy, in the way he interacts with people, but there seems to be a genuine desire to help there, I think.
right. And I think we've talked already about Steerpike's manipulation of the twins, but there was certainly Steerpike's relationship with Fuchsia, and then with Dr. Prunesqualler, and with Prunesqualler's sister Irma. I thought was
Right.
I mean, there was definitely some I I interpreted as sexual innuendo going on
Oh,
there.
for sure. I mean, he
He was
understood that here is a woman who is desperate for some attention, and he used that. And despite the age gap, she was so needy that he was able to wrap her around his finger.
right, right. But Fuchsia and Prunesqualler then are examples. Yeah, they wanted to help. They recognized him. Yeah, you're a kitchen boy, and so, but you seem to be an okay guy. So yeah, so when
Or at
Steerpike
least clever. Yeah.
clever, right? Yeah. Uh, so after waking Steerpike up with the green slime from the vase, Fuchsia welcomes him in a sense, and doesn't
That's funny.
doesn't. That was another funny moment. Yeah,
Thinking she was going to wake him up with water and putting slime all over his face.
because the flowers in this vase had become so
Yeah.
slimy over the years. Um, and then Prunesqualler, yeah, I'm glad you brought him up because he is. both a source of humor throughout the story, but as well as one of the characters that I think you're right. I think his heart in the end is probably in the right place. I don't know for sure if I can say that definitively, but he seems to be wanting to do the right thing
Right.
for the Groans and for the castle itself.
Right. A decent chap, I
Yeah.
think.
Right, 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 right.
Are there any characters? So, yeah, what we did talk about first sometimes Steerpike, but I do think there is still the open question of his motive. And that's one of the reasons why I think that one of my viewers compared him to Iago. Is this simple vengeance? Is this just desire for power? Is it a kind of sociopathic enjoyment of manipulating other people? What, in your opinion, is motivating? And are we right to some degree, at least, sympathize with the monster that he is, given the situation he's coming out of? You know, he was not treated well by Swelter. He was not treated particularly well by Flay or anyone for that matter. Even when Fuchsia discovers him, it's not a very kind. She just wants him out of her space. You
Right,
know,
right, right.
so he hasn't had much affection in his life. Should we take that into account when we're assessing his villainy, or is he just simply a sociopath that we can hate?
Oh boy, that goes back to my days as a and again as a recovering lawyer. That I had was court appointed to represent folks who committed crimes, and the vast majority of them came from just horrible backgrounds.
Right.
So it was very easy to be sympathetic with them, but at some point, our community, our society requires some basic level of showing dignity and respect to fellow members of the community. And I think that where Steerpike crossed the line was, um, going from that, he had that desire for more. He wanted to be recognized. He wanted to have more influence. He wanted to rise above the circumstances.
And he has the talent, he has the capability. It's within him, and it's being stifled by this
Right,
system, this rigid system that says, no, you're a kitchen boy. You know, there's more to him than that.
right. But yeah, so I think all of that is sympathetic. All of that, I certainly think is worthy of consideration in judging him as a character, to use that phrase. But yeah, at a certain point, I think there is a line, and he crossed it when it was just rampant destruction. And he's lucky, really, that only. I mean, he had this whole plot devised that he was going to be the hero by saving them, um, and uh, how that progressed. But he's really very lucky that only one person died out of that. I mean, he
Yeah.
could have destroyed the whole.
Unless you also count Lord Groan as a casualty.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Excellent point. That casualties aren't always measured by the actual incident itself, but by the aftermath and what happens. Yeah, you see that certainly in the wounds of war being not just physical but
Yeah.
mental, and that certainly is
Yeah.
the case for Lord Groan.
And again, Mervyn Peake himself would have understood this from his experience and of war. That he survived, but obviously it affected him deeply in many ways. One of the
Right.
things I love too about this story, as we come close to our finish, is how it goes full circle. And we with Rotcod once again at the end. Like,
Mhm.
here's a character introduced in the beginning. You're like, oh, okay, what's he gonna do in the story? And then he's gone for the entirety of the book because he's just sleeping up in that room by himself, not knowing what's happening anywhere, right? Just having his food sent up to him and dusting the the carvings,
Right.
leaving the dust, by the way, everywhere else, just dusting the carvings, right?
Carvings. Right.
He
Right.
lives in a dusty room. But and then there he is at the end again. We have this full circle moment, and I love this because it emphasizes just how isolated these people are. Just how isolated they've become because of their blind adherence to tradition and how rigid this is and how desiccated the life is there. And he thinks this is the height of bliss, sitting up there all by himself in his little space that is his little part of the castle, his castle within the castle, as it were. But yeah, I thought that was a brilliant touch, going back to Rotcod at the end and him viewing everybody from above.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. The whole ceremony where Titus became the Earl, he saw that, and part of him was like, well, nobody told me that the Earl of Groan had died. But then I think he's like, but I'm fine up here, so life will move on. I'll just continue to dust the bright carvings, and the life of the castle
Yeah.
will proceed. And yeah, that was I agree. That was an excellent way to cap this particular chapter in the story.
Yeah. Do you have
Yeah,
anything we didn't discuss that you want to make sure we talk about that for the good of the order?
there's one. I'll look at my notes real quick. But there's one again. Uh, as you know, on my channel, I like to look for the specific use of religious and spiritual themes in the books. And I've already talked about that quite a bit, but there's one more that I want to talk about because I think it's an interesting use of language and character names. The gardener during
Ah,
the Christmas
yes,
ceremony is named
Pentecost.
Pentecost,
Yeah.
and again, it's an example of Peake grafting Christian language onto this story, but was really empty of its meaning. Pentecost, of course, being it was a twofold meaning. First, it was a Jewish it was a harvest festival, basically, um, and then, of course, in Christianity, it became the day that the Holy Spirit descended upon the
Oh,
disciples after Jesus' death and resurrection.
yes.
But you think of a Pentecost moment as being a sign of new life, the Spirit moving, all of those things. So, in one way, this is an example of the use of the name Pentecost in that christening ceremony. Is an example. We have new life. We have Titus. It's possible new direction for Gormenghast. But in the midst of this, again, just ossified tradition, that's the
Mm.
exact opposite of what you might call a Pentecost moment. So again, I love playing with that kind of imagery, and who knows what exactly Peake was thinking of when he chose that name for that character. But I think it was revealing, in a certain sense, of of what is Gormenghast and what might come with Gormenghast.
Yeah. Well said. And I do think that Pentecost the gardener is the least affected by the insanity of Gormenghast. And it might be because he's outside all the time doing his gardening. He's actually bringing life into the world, unlike the rest of the characters who are stuck in their cycles of tradition. And within the trappings of the daily rituals, they're very much um, within the castle, whereas Pentecost is the one character who's part of the cast, but he's a little bit outside, I think, and that probably is healthy
Right,
in this
right,
case. Uh,
right,
but
right,
yeah, I thought that the descriptions around him too were particularly beautiful, around his activity and how nurturing he was toward the plants and everything that he brought into the world, and how he would bring a bit of that life into Gormenghast when he brought the flowers in for the ceremony. I thought that was kind of nice, and he would bring that into this one room that seemed to be in many ways the loveliest room in the castle, but it was not really used or seen very much. But he would bring flowers in there every day. So yeah, it's a bit sad that the one character who's in touch with the outside a little bit is very peripheral to the life of everyone else in the castle. But yeah,
right, right. Yeah, well said. Well said. I agree.
yeah. So
I think that covers pretty much
okay.
what I had in mind. So yeah, this was I mean, at the end of the day, I enjoy I definitely enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to continuing it. the I know what to do now to how I need to read it to enjoy it even more.
Lots of time. Yeah.
Yes, lots of time.
Yeah, let it steep. Yeah, I think that's good, and I will do the same. But thank you so much, Jay, for chatting with me. I appreciate this so much. We're going to continue this probably in well, we haven't decided exactly yet when we're doing the next one, but in the next month or two, probably, I would guess. And we will do that on Jay's channel, A Contemplative Reader. There will be a link in the description to Jay's channel. I highly encourage you to go check out Jay's videos, especially if you are interested in a spiritual approach to reading and to engaging with texts. And writers like you mentioned, Gene Wolfe earlier is a good example, I think, of a writer that you have a lot to process there. There's a lot of fuel for a reader like you when you're reading something by Gene Wolfe. So if you like that kind
And this author, I don't know what kind of a guy he is, but Dr. Philip Chase certainly has provided just an enormous wealth of riches for me to explore in his fantasy works. So yes, highly recommended as well.
That's very kind of you, Jay. I appreciate that. And I've really enjoyed actually watch if I can put this little aside,
Mhm.
and I really have enjoyed watching you read the Adam trilogy and your comments on it, particularly the perspective that you bring to it. So I think that's something that a lot of people will value. So go check out A Contemplative Reader. In the meantime, though, thank you so much for watching this video, and we'll see you guys in the next one.